Chicago, 1994. The red line hums beneath the city like a restless heartbeat. When commuters begin turning up dead, posed neatly on subway benches, as if waiting for their trains, Detective Miles Harrington is called in from New York to help unravel a puzzle buried deep in the tunnels. Each body tells a story of habit, of justice, of the past, refusing to stay buried. But in the shadows of the subway, someone else is keeping score. The Subway Shadows. Chapter 1. Red Line Southbound. Miles Harrington arrived in Chicago on a morning the color of old nickel. The call had come from Deputy Chief Samuel Pritchard of the CTA Transit Police, a body on the Red Line platform at Roosevelt, posed too neatly to be chance. "You know subways," Pritchard had said. "Ours just turned mean." Detective Carla Ristow met Miles at the turnstiles, trenchcoat thrown over a wool blazer that had seen its share of janitors' closets and morgue coolers. She fed a token into the gate like it offended her. "Victim's name is Seth Kopp," she said, leading him down to the island platform. "Insurance adjuster, 42. No wallet missing, no watch missing. Tie straightened, briefcase buckled, shoes aligned with the yellow standee line. He was made presentable after death." The platform hummed with the Red Line's animal sound, railhead squeal, air brakes sighing, the steady thunk of points. At the south end, crime scene tape flapped against tiled pillars. Carp sat upright on a bench, head listing slightly, hands folded over his briefcase. His overcoat was buttoned, a token still cupped in his palm. "Neck shows pressure bruising," Ristow said. "Medical examiner says strangulation with something soft. No fibers where you'd expect a rope burn. We're thinking forearm choke." "Staged after," Miles said, eyeing the tie. Whoever had straightened it knew how commuters looked when they wanted to be left alone. His gaze drifted to a blue grease smudge on the pillar behind the bench, a diagonal slash like a careless tally mark. "You mark platforms for anything?" he asked Pritchard. "Track crews use China markers," Pritchard said. "Blue for temp work, red for power, yellow for signals. Shouldn't be on the passenger side." A uniformed officer approached with a plastic evidence bag. Inside lay a paper transfer, the perforated kind the city still printed by the millions, stamped at a booth uptown in purple ink. "Howard, 7:06 a.m. "Carp lived in Hyde Park," Ristow said. "He wouldn't be near Howard at 7 unless he sleepwalked the length of the city." "Unless someone wanted us to think he rode from there," Miles said. He turned the transfer over. Someone, maybe the victim, maybe not, had folded the corner twice, making a blunt arrow. "Witnesses?" he asked. "Her platform cleaner saw a man in an orange vest walk Carp toward the south exit," Ristow said. "Said they looked like they knew each other. Cleaner didn't think to stop them. Vest means don't ask questions around here." "Contractors use the same vests as crews?" Miles asked. "Everyone with a ladder owns one," Pritchard said grimly. They walked the length of the platform, Miles counting tiles and trains, letting the space tell him what it could bear. The smell was iron and damp wool. At the south stairs, an emergency door sat propped with a flattened soda can. Beyond, a narrow corridor ran along the tunnel wall, a service route lit by bulbs that made everything look jaundiced. "Door alarm was cut," Ristow said. "We found tool marks that looked like a small notch was filed into the striker plate. Door closes, looks flush, never trips the switch." "Someone who knows doors," Miles said. "Someone who knew trains, doors, and habits." He climbed back to the bench and sat on the cold tile one step down from the body, aligning his knees with the yellow paint. Up tracks screamed. A train burst into the station and slid by, pixels of faces flicking as if the city were a film going too fast. "Why me?" he asked Ristow when the sound eased. "Chicago has 100 detectives. 4 days ago," she said, "a woman at Lake Station was stopped by a man in an orange vest who told her the northbound was skipping her stop. He offered to walk her to a shuttle. She said no. We didn't think much of it. Today, seeing this, the transit chief wanted someone who reads tunnels like spreadsheets." "And you?" Miles asked. I want someone who gets that a neat scene is louder than a messy one, Ristow said. Carp was arranged. Whoever did it wanted a point made without writing it in ketchup. Miles glanced again at the blue grease slash. It would wipe away with a sleeve, but someone had left it. A flag no one would see unless they cared. Does this city have abandoned pockets down here? He asked. Mezzanines closed after the war, service passages no one signs for. This is Chicago, Pritchard said. We got pockets in our pockets. Miles stood. Then we're dealing with a person who knows which pockets breathe and when, and he wears a vest to make you hold the door. The southbound crashed in, opened its mouth, ate a rush of passengers, and was gone. The platform returned to its hum. Carp did not move. The neatness of the scene had the quiet of an accusation. Chapter 2. The Man in the Vest. They didn't wait long for a second beat. That evening a call came from Grand Station. Another body, same posture, same folded hands, same studied normalcy. The victim, Moira Liu, 36, a high school English teacher, sat at the end of a platform bench with her bag zipped and a paperback tucked inside, spine uncracked. Transfer slip stamped Jackson 6:52 a.m., folded to the same blunt arrow. Ristow's jaw worked while she read the prelim. Different line on the stamp, same fold, she said. She lived in Bridgeport. The stamp says she came through Jackson at dawn. She coached debate until 9 last night. Colleagues saw her. Your vest man? Miles asked. Sir-gloved tech nodded toward the staircase. Cleaner at Grand says he saw an orange-vested guy with a clipboard escorting her through the emergency door 15 minutes before closing. Platform helper, maybe, the cleaner said. He told her to avoid the drunks. Miles stared at the transfer stamp. In New York, he'd learned to treat paper like it had a pulse. The Chicago slips looked generic, but their ink told stories. Stamps drifted with the habits of cashiers, clock drift, pressure. The 652 on Moira's card looked slightly light on the 5, as if the stamp pad were worn more at that digit. Carp's 706 had the same weakness in the 5 position when you mirrored the pad in your head. Same booth clerk, he said, or same stamp pad. Those booths are miles apart, Ristow said. Howard and Jackson, unless someone collected used slips from bins and chose the stamps he wanted us to see, Miles said. Transfers are supposed to be surrendered when you complete your ride. They get tossed by the handful. Pritchard rubbed his temples. We can check refuse schedules, he said without enthusiasm. Sanitation's a separate fiefdom. Down the platform, a poster announced, Night weekend service changes in block letters no one read. Trains would single track after midnight to allow signal work one tube carrying both directions in timed bursts. The kind of change that creates quiet pockets if you know how to stand in them. Your guy works nights, Miles said. Knows when the tube breathes only one way. He takes them into the seam and kills them in the lull. Poses them where the crowd will feel the normality in their bones. Ristow looked around the station's throat tile. Movies of commuters, a violinist sending Bach into stale air, and nodded once. I'll pull contractor lists, she said. Track flaggers, signal crews, cleaners, third-party maintenance. Everyone who wears orange and can lie with a straight face. They surfaced into a different city winter light, hitting loop facades like a judge's gavel. A reporter with a notebook too crisp to be seasoned stepped into their path. Jamal Peters, Sun Times, he said. 2 bodies, 1 day apart, both on the red. You want to tell Chicago if we should be terrified or just mildly undone? Tell Chicago to stand behind the yellow line, Ristow said, brushing past. Any symbolism to the posture? Jamal persisted, walking backward like a dancer. Hands folded like church, ties straightened, bags closed. It's almost polite. That's what I'm afraid of, Miles said without meaning to. Back at CTA HQ, Pritchard brought up a map of closed mezzanines and service doors. There were enough to lose a marching band. Some doors alarm to a central panel, he said. Some ring a bell that doesn't have a bell anymore. Some ring the conscience of whoever left it propped in 72. And a notch filed in a striker plate isn't in any schematic, Miles said. We need eyes in the tunnels. You volunteering? Ristow asked. Miles shrugged. I brought boots. They rode in a work car with a track crew after hours, lights throwing metal into violent relief. At each emergency door, the foreman stamped his marker, a blue slash or X to show he'd inspected the latch. We do this so the next guy knows, he shouted over the din. It's sloppy to leave it on the passenger side. Ever see a vest you didn't recognize? Ristow called. All the time, the foreman said. CT hires patch crews like it hires mayors. Past Jackson, the train paused to let a northbound rush by on the same track. The absence felt like pressure. Miles counted seconds until the air moved again. He imagined a killer waiting for that silence, like surfers waited for sets. When the car rolled, the foreman pointed at a blue diagonal on a pillar, twin to the one behind Carp's bench. New guy in signals marks like that, he said. Can't break him of the slash. What's his name? Ristow asked. Brandt, the foreman said. Leon came over from county courts 2 years ago, said he wanted honest work. Miles kept his gaze on the dark gap ahead. New names had a way of lighting old rooms. Chapter 3, Jurors. Leon Brandt had a square head and a vest that looked laundered, which already made him unusual. He answered questions with the patient blankness of people who'd learned that irritation got you reassigned to colder tunnels. I mark what I inspect, he said to Ristow in a fluorescent-lit office under State Street. Blue for me because I ran out of yellow. If I put a slash on a pillar, it means I looked at the door nearby. I do not use passenger-side pillars. That'd be sloppy. You used one at Roosevelt, Ristow said. I didn't, Brandt said evenly. Where were you between 9 and midnight last night? She asked. On a flag crew north of Fullerton, he said. Supervisor can confirm. You can check the incident logs. We killed power on track 2. Miles watched him like he watched a metronome, looking for a limping beat. Brandt's hands were thick. A silver courthouse lapel pin glinted on his vest, something sentimental rather than political. You used to work at county courts, Miles asked. Bailiff, Brandt said. 7 years, too much sitting. The tracks are quiet. I like quiet. Ever pull shifts at the Daily Center? Miles asked. Couple of civil trials, sure, Brandt said. Why? Because, Ristow cut in, eyes on a phone that had just rung with news. Both victims, Carp and Liu, served on the same civil jury in 1991, case against the CTA after the Jackson smoke incident. She glanced at Miles. Our housekeeping fire in a storeroom that filled a platform with smoke. 1 fatality. Claims of negligence. Jury found for the Transit Authority. Brandt didn't blink. I wasn't on that courtroom, he said. You can ask the clerk. Clerks change, Ristow said. Minds don't. They left him to his supervisor and the soft war of union rules. In the hallway, Miles said, How sealed are juror lists here? They're supposed to be sealed, Ristow said. In the real world, a bad cousin with a copier could make a career. Victims on that jury is not coincidence, Miles said. Someone is killing people who once voted that a crowded platform met the city's duty of care. Polite bodies as a manifesto, Ristow said. Neat is louder. They walked to the Daily Center, the building that made the wind angrier. Inside, a clerk with a nameplate reading Daria Holm looked up from a tower of files with the expression of a person daring them to ask for something reasonable. When they did, she frowned in actual sympathy. Case was Hammond versus Chicago Transit Authority, she said, flipping a ledger with nicotine-yellow fingers. I can't give you addresses. I can tell you juror numbers and occupations if you say please. Please, Ristow said. Holm listed them. An insurance adjuster, a teacher, a postal worker, a paralegal, and others. 12 in all, an ordinary cross-section. 2 have moved out of state, she added. 1 died last year, natural causes. Any record of who worked that courtroom? Miles asked. Holmes' frown returned. Bailiffs rotate, she said. If you're sniffing around Leon Brandt, he did family court then. I remember because he brought homemade coffee cake that could double as evidence. Why? Because he marks pillars like a priest marks foreheads, Miles said. Back on State Street, Jamal Peters popped out of revolving doors like a misdelivered letter. You look like a headline, he said. Anything for Chicago? Don't be alone on empty platforms, Ristow said, and tell your editor to stop using the word serial. It makes people look for art where there's only habit. Jamal's pencil hovered. If there's no art, why the posture? Because the killer wants to claim the moral high ground without writing a sermon, Miles said. He straightens ties so you don't have to look at what was done. That night they split the jury list. Ristow took 3 names to knock on doors. Pritchard sent patrol to the other 4. Miles rode the red line back and forth and learned the sound of the tunnel when it held its breath. At Jackson, he lingered. The storeroom from 1991 had been tiled over, but the scorch mark in local memory remained. At midnight, a man in an orange vest with a clipboard stepped onto the north end of the platform and scanned for someone looking lost. Miles drifted closer, hands in pockets, posture of a man waiting for a train that was late on purpose. Service change northbound, the vest murmured to a woman at the edge. Shuttles through here. He palmed the emergency door and pushed. Miles stepped in his path. You with signals? He asked, all casual inquiry. The man smiled too quickly. Track flagger, he said, angling to slide past. Where's your crew? Miles asked. Up tube, the man said, which was true in every direction. Where's your name patch? Miles asked. The smile faltered. He turned for the door, quick as a rabbit. Miles grabbed for the vest, got fabric and clipboard, and then the man jutted a shoulder into Miles's ribs and was gone into the yellowish corridor, feet slapping, the door clanging shut with a view of a notch in the striker plate that looked like a wolf's bite. By the time they cleared the door with a key, the corridor breathed emptiness. On the floor lay a paper transfer folded to a blunt arrow, stamped with a booth mark from a station no one would ride at that hour. The blue slash on the wall looked like a laugh. Chapter 4, Paper and Air. Morning brought a 3rd juror afraid to ride. Arthur Delaney, postal worker, 60, who answered his door with a baseball bat and a look that made Miles think of winter birds. You're telling me 2 people from that jury are dead, Delaney said. And now you want me to take the train to work? I'll walk. We'll post a car, Ristow said. Change your routine. If anyone in an orange vest approaches you, tell him you collect stamps and see how he handles a joke. Delaney barked a dry laugh. Last time someone in a vest told me how to queue, it was a temp at the post office who lasted an hour. They canvassed vendors who sold transfer paper by the pallet. The stamps and pads came from a city contract. The ink was cheap, the pads cheaper. An older man at Storehouse Supply told Ristow, kids grab stacks from trash. They make collages with the little numbers. I seen it. Ever sell China markers? Miles asked. By the box, he said. Blue's more expensive. Who buys blue? Ristow asked. Signal boys, the man said, and a lady who labels cake boxes. Back at HQ, Pritchard grimaced at procurement logs. Blue markers to signals, track, and a contractor named Mid-City Maintenance, he said. They clean stations at night. Cash on the nail. Let's count their vests, Ristow said. They found Mid-City in a cinder block office under a viaduct. The owner, Winona Greaves, had a cigarette voice and a ledger that looked like it had seen perjury. She slapped a stack of vendor receipts on a desk. We got 6 vests, she said. One's at the cleaners, 2 got paint on them, and the rest smell like the red line, none missing. Any of your people look like a foreman? Ristow asked. All my people look like they're on their last chance, Greaves said. Foremen don't work nights unless their alimony says so. Miles thumbed a receipt. You bill a lot of Jackson, he said. Trash flows downhill, Greaves said. Jackson's a hill. On a hunch, Miles walked the underground pedway that stitched the loop together like a nervous system. Between mall tile and municipal beige, he found a metal door with a painted-over sign. The lock had a notch filed, not worn. He listened. Air on the other side moved in timed breaths. You want to wait here all night? Ristow asked. I want to learn this door's heartbeat, Miles said. They did 1 hour, then 2, with the city passing over their heads like a weather report. At 1:13 a.m., when the timetable said single tracking would push a westbound through the East Tube, the door opened from the inside. A man in an orange vest stepped out with a clipboard and a bag of transfers. "Hey," Ristow said softly, gun low. "Don't." He froze, eyes skittering, a deer in a fluorescent field. "I'm just cleaning," he said. "With upper management's clipboard?" Ristow asked. He bolted not toward the tunnel, but toward a stair that rose to a maintenance mezzanine. Miles took them 2 at a time behind him, lungs burning in the dry air. The man shouldered through a swinging gate and vanished into a dark where the smell of ozone made Miles think of bad weather. They found nothing but a stool and a view through a grill of the platform below. A watcher's nest. On the stool sat another transfer, stamped with the telltale light 5. Folded like the others, arrow pointing down at the commuters who didn't know the platform had an attic. "Not our man," Ristow said, winded. "A mule. Someone collects paper, someone else arranges it at scenes. Someone who used to know juror numbers," Miles said. "Someone who learned that a courtroom is a train that never arrives." They hauled the mule in. He gave his name as Victor Mlodinow, a cleaner working for cash. He said a man in a vest paid $10 for sacks of discarded transfers for art. He described the vest as generic and the man as generic. He wore a hard hat, Victor said, and looked like he ate alone. Pritchard wanted to hammer him. Ristow let him sweat in a room with a broken clock. Miles stared at the blue slashes and the notched doors in his sketchbook and wrote a single name in the corner, Leon Brandt. He didn't circle it. He didn't want to be wrong loudly. At dawn, the city's breath changed. Commuters descended with coffees and a permission structure for ignoring each other. Miles stood beside the standee line and watched hundreds do the thing the killer honored, the stubborn theater of getting to work. The neat bodies were a rebuke, but to whom was still the question. Chapter 5. The Fold. Paralegal Carmen Ruiz answered her door in slippers and relief when she saw badges. "I was on that jury," she said before they asked. "I remember him, Carp. He kept notes like he wanted a raise for it." "Do you remember the bailiff?" Miles asked. She tilted her head. "Big guy, crew-cut, thick hands," she said. "He'd say all rise like he meant it. Why?" "Because he changed jobs," Ristow said. Carmen nodded toward a coffee table piled with legal pads. "We took our responsibility serious," she said, "but it was a weird case. The CTA lawyer said people should have moved faster. Plaintiff's lawyer held up a photo of a woman in a winter coat and asked who wanted to push her. We picked what we could live with." "Did anyone talk to you after?" Miles asked. "Only a reporter," she said. "He sent a letter with a list of juror numbers and asked if any of us wanted to talk off the record about pressure we felt. I didn't call." "Do you have the letter?" Ristow asked. Carmen rummaged and produced a thin envelope with a Sun-Times masthead that had faded to ghosts. The byline, Jamal Peters. The date, 3 years ago. The list, juror numbers, followed by general occupations. No names. "Legal," Carmen said. "He never got our names. I checked with the clerk." Outside, Miles found Jamal leaning on a newspaper box. "This age of me just met that age of me," the reporter said, reading their faces. "If you're about to ask, no, I didn't unseal anything. I ran a story about a city that wants cheap luck. It didn't move anyone." "You kept your list?" Ristow asked. "I keep everything," he said. "I don't keep addresses because I like sleeping." "Anyone else keep it?" Miles asked. "Intense copy at the paper," Jamal said. "The shred bin gets emptier when interns are bored." They met with CTA safety advisor Conrad Vale, a man with the manner of a tie pin. He walked them through service change calendars and the bureaucratic courage it took to close a tube. "We publish these notices everywhere," he said, thumbing a stack of posters. "No one reads them." "Except a killer," Miles said. Vale adjusted his tie. "You want to frighten the city, call all these serial," he said. "You want to keep it moving, call it under investigation and ride." "We want to stop it," Ristow said. She sent units to ride trains shadowing named jurors. She posted officers at mezzanine doors she didn't trust. She asked Pritchard to detail 2 plainclothes in orange vests to move through the system like bait. Miles rode with a motorman in the cab of an after-hours northbound through the State Street subway. The motorman gave his name as Eli Novak and his opinions as free samples. "People think the city is a promise," he said. "It's an accident we keep fixing." At Monroe, Novak killed the lights to simulate a shutdown. The dark in the tube felt like a held note. In that dark, Miles understood the routines the killer loved. The pause between trains, the moment when everyone believed someone else was watching. On the 3rd pass, someone had filed another striker plate notch at a door that had been clean at midnight. The blue slash beside it felt like a boast. Miles unfolded the transfers they'd collected. Each had 2 folds that made a blunt arrow. He aligned them on the table back at HQ. The arrows didn't point to stations on a map. They pointed to a habit, toward the south ends of platforms, toward the doors nearest the service corridors. Not art practice. Ristow returned from the postal workers' block with good news. Arthur Delaney had made it through a shift with escort. "He hates us," she said, "which is how I like my living witnesses." Pritchard burst in behind her. "We just got a call," he said. "Juror 4 Brendan Cooley, a city planner found dead at Lake. Same posture. Security says an orange-vested man told them he was escorting him to a public meeting." "Juror 4 voted to acquit," Ristow said bleakly. "And to keep the trains on time," Miles said. "The killer's got a sense of symmetry." He didn't say what he was thinking. That symmetry is how some people apologize without using words. Chapter 6, Brandt. They brought Leon Brandt in again, this time with a union rep who looked like a door that wouldn't open for the wrong key. Brandt sat with his hands flat on the table and watched Miles like a man who'd seen good cops and bad at a distance and decided to commit to neither. "Juror list," Ristow said. "You ever lay eyes on it?" "No," Brandt said. "You worked county courts during Hammond versus CTA, she said. "I worked family court," he said. "You want me to recite the names of divorcing couples from 91? I can. But I didn't work that trial." "Transfers folded to arrows," Miles said. "Blue slashes on passenger pillars, doors notched so alarms don't cry. Those are your habits." Brandt's mouth did a thing like almost smiling. "You think I invented a slash?" he said. "You think a man who worked courts can't keep his hands from showing he worked courts?" "So that's a yes," Ristow said. "That's a man with a pencil," Brandt said. "I carry a pencil." "Where were you the night Cooley died?" she asked. "Flagging at Belmont," he said. "You got logs, you got eyes." The union rep cleared his throat. "My guy's done talking if you're going to staple a death to him without proving you were out of staples." After, in the hallway, Pritchard said, "He's clean on paper. Clocks don't wobble around him. His supervisor says he's the only one who brings coffee for the crew." "People say that about men who want to be trusted," Ristow said. Jamal waited on the steps with a cigarette he didn't light. "Your blue slashes are breeding," he said. "I saw one at Grand where tourists take photos. It made the platform look like it knew something I didn't." "Write that," Ristow said. "Then write, 'Don't talk to men in orange vests unless they can name their foreman.'" Miles drifted back toward Jackson with his notebook of notches. The door to the old Pedway mezzanine had new scratches. He stood with his ear to the metal like a child listening to the ocean and counted the air moving inside. A man in an orange vest appeared beside him as if conjured. Not Brandt, younger, hair too neat. "Problem, sir?" the man asked. "I'm a fan of doors," Miles said. "This one has admirers." The man smiled. "Doors are the only machine most people use without thinking," he said. "I'm with Mid-City. We clean the thinking off." "Name?" Miles asked. "Riley Dameron," he said. He tapped his vest. "See, it's stitched." "Who stitched it?" Miles asked. "My mother," he said, and for the first time Miles liked someone in a vest. That night, Carmen Ruiz called in a tip. A man in an orange vest had waited outside her building, then left when a patrol car idled at the curb. "He didn't look at me," she said. "He looked at my elevator, like it was an ally." Ristow swore softly. "He's escalating meetings," she said. "He's coming to them." They canvassed Leon Brandt's block. Neighbors said he shoveled other people's steps and used a broom like a sermon. A woman across the hall remembered his wife dying too young, and a rumor that he'd blamed the city for a long time without saying which part. "Wife's name?" Miles asked. "Paula," the neighbor said. She didn't like heavy coats, said they made her feel trapped. Miles wrote her name and let it sit on the page like a rumor made heavier by ink. Chapter 7. Breathe. They set a plainclothes officer to shadow Arthur Delaney's walk home. At the corner of State and Adams, a man in a vest called out, "Sir, service change shuttle on the mezzanine." Delaney kept walking. The vest peeled off, not hurrying, and entered a doorway marked employees only with a confidence that came from practice. Ristow took the stairs 2 at a time and arrived at the mezzanine in time to see the vest open a maintenance cage and slip into a corridor that smelled like warm dust. She pushed through with her badge raised and her hand near her gun. The corridor dead-ended at a steel door with a manual bolt. On the other side, air moved in measured breaths. She listened and could almost hear a platform pretend to be safe. Miles traced blue slashes on a schematic and found something that had been there the whole time. The marks formed a series that matched emergency exit numbering, like someone playing connect the dots with 5-foot-high numerals. If you followed the slashes, they walked you from Howard to Lake to Jackson to Roosevelt, like a guide with poor taste. "Pretty," Pritchard said. "Useless." "Not useless," Miles said. "He wanted us to see a walk. We saw a sprint." They requested courthouse staffing logs from 1991. Daria Holm called that afternoon with an answer that tasted like old coffee. "Brandt wasn't assigned to Hammond," she said, "but he swapped 2 days with Dan Willett for a dental appointment." "Dates?" Ristow asked. Holm read them. One was the day the jury was sworn. Another was the day the jurors were released. "He would have been in the room when they took their oaths," she said. That night, a 4th juror, Carmen Ruiz, didn't answer her phone. Patrol banged on her door and found it empty. Her neighbor said a man in a vest had been buzzing earlier. Very polite. The building's back stair door had a fresh notch. The elevator smelled like a basement. On the second-floor landing, a blue slash marked the wall above a fire door. Ristow pushed through, her face going white in a way Miles had only seen when a scene turned into a regret. On the stairwell landing, Carmen sat upright, hands folded, eyes closed. Alive. Duct tape lay on the floor like a bad idea reconsidered. "She fought," Ristow said, voice shaking with relief. "He staged and ran." Carmen, trembling, said, "He said he wasn't cruel. He said he didn't want me to be scared, and he said he wanted the city to listen." "What did he smell like?" Miles asked gently. "Soap," she said. "Not cigarettes, not sweat. Soap like the courthouse." "Did he say a name?" Ristow asked. "No," Carmen said. "But he asked if I remembered a woman in a photo at trial. The one in the winter coat. He said her name was Paula." Miles closed his eyes. Paula Brandt in a coat that felt like a trap. Chapter 8. Last Train. Winter through needles. They put a plainclothes officer in an orange vest with a stitched name. Riley Dameron's mother did the honors and sent him to loiter at Jackson, while Miles took a seat near the south end with his hands warming around coffee he didn't drink. On the platform hung a poster for night weekend service changes. In the corner someone had written in pen, "Please read this one. Come on." The city had not obliged. At 12:41 a.m., the tube went quiet for the changeover. The vest looked at his watch the way men check tidal charts. He approached a woman at the edge. Officer Ada Fry nodded toward the mezzanine and got a blank stare. He smiled like a man humoring a dog. Then he turned toward Miles and raised one palm as if to say, "Wait and watch." Miles stood. He kept his hands visible, posture loose. The man's face was new, soft-eyed, pale from fluorescent habit. Not Brandt. But his hands were a match for the neatness of bodies on benches. "Service change?" Miles asked. "Shuttle through here," the man said. "Come along." "Name?" Miles asked. "Walt Sabo," he said without pause. Foreman's Leon. Miles followed 2 steps, enough to see the notch filed into the striker plate, enough to commit the man's voice to a drawer labeled Borrowed Confidence. Then he said, "That isn't your name." The man blinked, pivoted, went for the door. Officer Fry moved like a spring uncoiling. She pinned him to tile with more care than force. He sagged, all the will leaking out at once. In the room with the broken clock, he gave his name as Devon Klein and his job as extra hands, no union. He said a man in a vest paid him to collect transfers, to ferry sacks from bins, to open doors for special cleaning. He described a face you could paste on a driver's license and forget. He described coffee that smelled like the courthouse break room. "You said his foreman is Leon," Ristow said. "He said Leon a lot," Klein replied, eager. "Like a password." They could hold Klein for the notches. They could hold him for the doors. They could not pin a death to him. Ristow looked at Miles over Klein's bowed head. "You still not circling a name?" she asked. "I'm circling more than one," he said. "And all the circles overlap in a room where a bailiff once asked 12 people to swear they'd listen." He called Jamal and asked for a favor. "Run a piece that says the CTA will pause all-night single tracking on the red tonight," he said. "Lie." "You want to spook him into a different tube," Jamal said. "I want him to come explain himself," Miles said, "on a platform that has too many cops on it." "Chicago doesn't like explanations," Jamal said, "but it loves a show." Chapter 9. The Courthouse in the Tunnel. The lie ran quiet. The poster appeared on a dozen platforms by noon. "Night work suspended tonight, regular service." Beneath it, someone wrote in pen, "Thank you." Another wrote, "Liars." At 11:08 p.m., the tube held its breath anyway. You can't cancel physics. They watched the notched door at Jackson like parishioners watch a side altar. At 11:19, it opened from the inside. Leon Brandt stepped out in a vest. He carried a clipboard and something like grief wrapped in competence. He saw Ristow, saw Pritchard, saw Miles, and did not flinch. "Service change," he said, as if daring them to correct him. "We lied," Ristow said. "You lied to the city," Brandt said calmly. "I lied to 12 people when I told them their verdict would sleep well." He moved to shut the door. Miles put a palm against it and felt the notch vibrate through metal. "Paula," he said softly. Brandt's jaw tightened. He looked at Miles as if deciding whether a stranger could be admitted to a private funeral. "My wife," he said. "Smoke at Jackson, winter of 91. People didn't move. People never move. She died standing." "The jury found the city met its duty," Miles said. "They did," Brandt said. "They were wrong." "They've been killing jurors who agreed with that verdict," Ristow said, neatly, as if you could tidy a lie into a truth. "I've been arranging truths the city doesn't like to see," Brandt said. "I posed them as commuters because they didn't get to be anything else." "Devon Klein says you paid him to cut doors," Ristow said. "Devon Klein can't cut paper without a dotted line," Brandt said. "I paid him to fetch trash. I cut my own doors." "Transfers?" Miles asked. "You picked stamps from bins to build a story." "I used what the city discarded," he said, "like it used us." He turned to go. Ristow stepped into his path. Brandt looked past her at the platform and then at the rule book he'd written in his head. "If you run," she said, "you run into a train." "If I stand," he said, "I stand like she did." "Not alone," Miles said. Brandt breathed once, twice, measured. Then he set down the clipboard and put his hands behind his head, in a motion that looked rehearsed from a different life. Ristow cuffed him, while Pritchard recited words none of them believed were adequate to the day. In the room with the broken clock, Brandt spoke with the calm of a man who had counted this hour. "I wanted them to understand what they voted for," he said, "to sit up straight with their belongings arranged and their mouths closed while the city moved around them like weather." "You could have made a speech," Ristow said. "They don't hear speeches," he said. "They hear trains." Chapter 10. Standee Line. Brandt took them to the place in the service corridor where he did the work. He showed them how the notch made the door pretend to be closed. He showed them a stool that looked down through a grill onto the platform, a courtroom gallery tilted at an angle. "I picked people who still rode," he said. "Most of them did. They trusted the city. So did Paula." "Why the grease slashes on passenger pillars?" Miles asked. "So I could see if anyone was paying attention," Brandt said. "You were." "Why the transfers?" Ristow asked. "Because the city says a ride is time-limited," he said. "So is a life." He confessed to Karp, Liu, and Cooley, and to an attempt on Carmen Ruiz that he abandoned when he saw her shaking. "I'm not cruel," he said again, and his voice made the sentence sound like a question he needed someone to answer. "You killed them," Ristow said. He nodded. "But I didn't make the platform." In court he would talk about duty and the private mechanics of suffering. A lawyer would talk about doors and notches. A reporter would try to write the right number of inches. The city would read the first paragraph and check the weather. Miles rode the red line south after dawn, the city putting its face back on in the windows. He stood behind the yellow line and watched the standees in their practiced postures. The neatness he'd hated in the scenes on the benches was also what held mornings together. Hands folded, bags closed, faces arranged for the day. He thought of Paula Brandt in a winter coat, the photograph a lawyer had held up. He thought of a verdict that fit the law better than it fit the air. At Roosevelt, he stood where Seth Karp had been made presentable and looked at the pillar where the blue slash had been wiped away by a janitor who didn't like graffiti. The city exhaled another train. The platform breathed. He heard the small sounds of courtesy, people moving to make room. Anne thought maybe the killer had been right about one thing. People hear trains. He called Ristow before he left town. "If you ever need to lie to the city again," he said, "call me first. I get paid to be convincing." "You get paid to be correct," she said. "But I'll call you anyway." Pritchard shook his hand at the turnstiles with a grip that said vaguely, "Union." "We'll fix the doors," he said. "We'll put alarms that yell." "You'll teach people to look up," Miles said. "You've met people," Pritchard said. Miles fed a token into the gate with affection for the friction. He climbed to a street where winter made wind like a rule. Chicago was a city of pockets, and he had walked a few of them until they stopped breathing wrong. On the plane he drew a rectangle labeled courtroom and a rectangle labeled platform, and a line between them he named habit. It wasn't neat. He let it stay that way. End of chapter and end of story. Please like and subscribe to support our channel, and to listen to more murder mysteries and investigative stories.